This is a tutorial on the California Residential Purchase Agreement, CAR Form RPA, revised 1225. It's the week of December 15th, 2025. This is the newest version of the form that we'll be using going into 2026. And I figured that I'll just do a tutorial on the entire form. This bundle is actually 29 pages now. I think 17 of which are the actual purchase agreement, but I'll go through it quickly here. We'll start at the top with a disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship, and all you do is put your buyer's name, your brokerage, your name, and then both you and the buyer sign page 1 of 2. Page 2, you don't do anything, you just skip it. And we arrive at the actual purchase agreement. We start by putting the date that we draft the offer in the top left corner, the name of the buyer here on this line, property address right down here, and then the assessor's parcel number, which is like the tax ID for real estate. And you can find that on the MLS, on tax records. You can find it on the county assessor's website from the listing agent. And if all else fails, just leave it blank. Seller's brokerage, you'll put in the listing brokerage here, their license number, listing agent. The listing agent's license number, you'll check the box that they're representing the seller exclusively. Then your brokerage, your name, and then your brokerage license and your license, and that you're representing the buyer exclusively. Then we move on to the actual purchase price, and I put in a nice round 1 million even as an example. If this were an all cash offer, I would check this box, but it's not. We're going to pretend the buyer's getting financing, so I'm going to leave all cash blank. For close of escrow, I check this box and I write in 30 days. It's probably the most typical escrow period, 30 days after acceptance. Of course, you can write in whatever you want there. And then if you want to do a definitive calendar date, just check this box and write in that calendar date here. For expiration of offer, now I leave this blank. This whole form is filled out just as if I were drafting this offer for a client. So I'm showing you exactly what I would do. I would leave this blank. But if you want to tighten up the expiration period to put pressure on the seller to get back to you, well, you can shorten it up here. You can make it tomorrow or the day after tomorrow instead of waiting 3 calendar days for this to expire. But I would leave it blank. I'm just showing you what I would do. Initial deposit amount, also known as the earnest money deposit, 1 to 3% of the sales price or purchase price is customary. So I just put 2%. I write in $20,000 and then it automatically calculates the percentage here. You don't have to put anything in here, and I just leave it alone. Increased deposit, don't even worry about that. Jump down here to loan amount, and we're pretending this buyer's doing an 80-20 loan. That's 20% down, and then 80% is the loan, a conventional loan. So if you don't do anything here, it's automatically a conventional loan. Of course, check the box if it's FHA or VA, but if it's conventional, just leave it alone. You don't have to do anything here. Fixed rate, I would leave this blank, and a lot of agents do. I don't think it's binding to put in some rate. It may be more diligent to fill this out, but if you don't have the info handy, don't bother. I think it's a little bit unnecessary. All right, and then we go down. Now, if there's seller financing or a second loan, this is where you fill it out, but that's less common, so we're skipping it. Occupancy type, by default, primary residence. I actually wish this wasn't in here. This doesn't belong in here. But again, that's my commentary. So if it's a second home or investment, check the box, but by default, it's primary. And this is already calculated for you. And we get on to page 2. Now, is a seller crediting buyer toward their closing costs? Is the seller going to help out the buyer with their closing costs? And you're asking for like $5,000 from the seller to be applied towards the buyer's closing costs? Well, this is where you check that box and write it in here. It says, see how it says closing costs right there? And then there's additional seller credit terms, less commonly used. Maybe there's a credit for something like replacing carpeting or something like that. You'd put it in here, less common. Now, very common, I would say almost always on all offers, you're going to check this box. This is where the seller is going to reimburse what the buyer has pledged to pay you, their agent, on the buyer representation agreement. So remember in the BRBC, the buyer representation agreement, the buyer's pledging to pay you a commission? Well, you can put that number here. You write it in there. You check this box. Don't forget, I see offers where they miss this box being checked. Naughty, naughty. Don't do that. And then you put in the commission you're going to charge or that you're charging the buyer. that the seller's reimbursing. Now, of course, they have these other lines here if it's a flat fee or to write something else in, but you're just going to put in whatever is on the BRBC, and we move on. And this is where it's a verification. Just leave all this by default. 3 days for verification. Read it if you want. I'm showing you how to quickly fill this out. I could go through this line by line and bore you to tears talking about this form and every backstory of everything that I've come across in years of brokering transactions. But the idea of this tutorial is to move quickly. All right, so I'm leaving all this as default verbiage. Now, contingencies. This section is actually very important. Think of contingencies as being basically in 3 parts. You have loan, you have appraisal, and then you have investigations. This whole thing is investigations down here. Loan, appraisal, investigations. If this were a cash offer, I would check these boxes. No loan, no appraisal contingency, because those don't apply. But this buyer is getting a loan, so I'm leaving it at 17 days default. Okay. Now, if I need to modify it, talk to the lender. Maybe they'll tell you they need more time, or maybe they'll shorten it because you're in a multiple offer scenario and you need to put 10 days here or something like that to show that you're very motivated to move quickly and to accept your offer among all the other buyers on a multiple offer. But the point is, I'm leaving it by default, and I'm doing that for investigation. Now, a few years ago, C.A.R. split up investigation to parse out these different elements of investigation. Again, overly complicated. By the way, there is just no simplicity factored into C.A.R. forms, unfortunately. They're designed to protect agents and protect the principles of a transaction. They're good in that way, but they abandon any semblance of simplicity. So it's a little bit excessive all the time. And in this case, leave it all 17. Now, if you need to change something, you can put 10 days here, something like that. But really, I just say leave it in the default 17 days that they have on here. Sale of buyer's property, by the way, this is a rare scenario, but that's when you can attach that COP form, and there will be another tutorial. I'm sure I have an old one, but I'm redoing a bunch of tutorials. So look out for that sale of buyer's property, because this one comes up. I get a lot of phone calls seeking support on this particular form. Again, leaving all of this just the way it's written by default. That's it. It's really that easy. I'm giving a long explanation here, but it's that simple. Then buyer's initial, we move on. This page, it's better to err on the side of caution and check all these boxes. Why? Because if you check a box, this is wine refrigerator, because you're unsure or you forgot, and there is no wine refrigerator, then someone will just shrug. They'll say, we don't have one, whatever. But it's better to be safe than sorry, because many times over the years, I've had agents call and say, I accidentally didn't check this box, or I thought I checked it, or I thought it was under this other refrigerator because there's an S here, but it didn't include the wine refrigerator under the kitchen island. So the point is, it's better to overcheck than undercheck. And look out for this one, because lots of cars are getting built-in car charging stations, and some sellers want to take it. And so it's good to, if the seller has a Tesla or whatever, they have this built into their garage, to check this box, because this is becoming increasingly common as EVs are fairly common. So again, overcheck rather than undercheck, because it's not like you're asking the seller to pay for anything. You're just making sure that if it's there, it stays. That's it. Okay. Natural hazard disclosure paid by the seller, add environmental, and I'm just putting fastenhd.com on here. This provided by this is so annoying. Why is there a checkbox for provided by? Why? At some point someone put this on here accidentally and no one bothered to remove it. But I could go on about all of my critique of C.A.R. forms, and that would be another boring video. All right, so here we have inspections. All right, so termite report, simple enough to call it that. Have the seller pay. Seller gets a termite report. Maybe the buyer wants to order their own to be in control of it, but if not, customarily the seller orders a termite report. You can put it in wood destroying pest report, but termites more commonly used. Physical inspection, you don't need to put this in, but some do, and the buyer pays. They get their own inspection. Seller should always do the smoke alarms, CO2 detectors, water heater bracing. If you disagree, come at me in the comments, but I'm telling you, the seller should always do this, and I have good reason why. All right, now this is a huge point of contention here, this Q5, Q6. If you're writing an offer, you should know if that city requires a point of sale inspection. A few cities do. A handful of cities do. I can think of a few off the top of my head. Most don't, but you should know, because at some point, if there is a city inspection required, well, who's going to pay for it? I mean, you're going to have to settle it sooner or later. Now, a lot of times agents leave these two blank, and that's fine. I personally think if you know that there is a required point of sale inspection or a report even, some cities let you do one or the other, just have the seller do it. Have the seller do it. Because the seller has to open their home up to the city to come in. The city's pointing out an issue with the seller's property. Could a buyer? Yes. But if you're going to not leave this blank, check the seller box. If you leave it blank, it's fine. You just may have to deal with it later. This, over a lot of back and forth issues I've seen over the years, this should be left blank. And this should not be in the purchase agreement. C.A.R. If you're listening, this should not be in the purchase agreement, okay? This is signing a blank check. It's reckless for either one, and when I say one, I mean party, the buyer or seller, to sign up to pay for corrective remedial actions. What happens if there's a point of sale inspection and the city says, this is unpermitted, this and this and this, X, Y, and Z are unpermitted, and we're going to give you a citation and it's $40,000 to correct. Okay? Things like that come up. I've seen it happen firsthand. Should the buyer be on the hook for that? Does a seller want to sign up for the $40,000 obligation that the city is going to levy on them? So that's why this is a blank check danger zone right here. Skip Q6. Don't do it. Escrow fee. Now, Southern California is more uniform how they do this. Northern California isn't. So I'm just doing this the Southern California way. Northern California, I actually have a cheat sheet. I should link to it. I'll link to it in the description that shows who pays what in Northern California, because it varies county to county. Sometimes even one part of the county does things one way, one part does the other way. In Southern California, each pay their own fee, and the seller chooses who does escrow. And escrow and title are often different in Southern California, whereas in Northern California, title has their own escrow division do it. So it's the same company under the same roof. Escrow and title under the same roof, Northern California. Southern California, seller pays owner's title owner's title insurance policy. And that too is seller's choice. So this is how it's done in Southern California. Seller chooses escrow and title. Seller pays for the owner's title policy. Both pay then the escrow fee. They split it. County transfer tax, seller pays in Southern California. City transfer tax, it's few cities do this. Most don't. Some do. You should know if they do, or if you're unsure, or you think that they might. Again, I have that cheat sheet. I should have had it to show on this video, but I'll link to it. And the seller would pay that in Southern California. Seller pays a lot of these in Southern California. See HOA transfer. If there's an HOA, the seller pays in Southern California. All right. So you see the pattern here: seller, seller, seller. And then if there's something that hasn't been mentioned that needs to be paid, and you could sneak in a transaction coordinator fee or a broker processing fee. I did another video on how to pass your fees on to your client, like many service professionals do. I just got a bill from my attorney. He charged me for postage. He charged me for printing. He charges me for everything. He's a great attorney. I don't fault him for that. All attorneys do that. Agents should get in the habit of passing on some of their fees. Look for the separate video. Okay, home warranty plan chosen by buyer. It's ridiculous how they put this thing where you're supposed to figure out the coverage right now. Put TBD or leave it blank right here. Put TBD or leave it blank. Seller to pay, issued by TBD, or right in the company if you know. And then to get an amount, call the home warranty. There's all these reps for home warranty companies. They'll happily give you a quote. If not, just put in a number that, $1,000, $1,200. I mean, they can counter it out if they don't like it. You're not going to lose a deal over this. You're not going to lose a deal over the number you put here. You might get a counter offer over it. But if you want to know what the number is, I used to use First American Home Warranty's site, but they just changed it where you can't go in and build your own policy, because I could whip up a quote in 2 minutes and get an exact number for a nice policy. That's gone. So now I just say, call whatever home warranty company you like. They're all pretty much equally terrible, to be honest. And get a quote from a rep, and then put that number here. Or if you have an idea, a general idea, put that number there. Other terms, anything that we didn't talk about, go ahead and write that in here. Okay. 80% of the work is done now on this thing, maybe even more. If you've made it this far, you've gotten past the hardest part. All right. Now we're just coasting downhill all the way to the end. See this mess, this mess of forms. Well, just skim through it. If you have a unique scenario, you're selling a rural property where there's a septic tank, check the box. But just scroll through here. You'll know if it applies to you when you go through it. So just skim through and see if it applies to you. And if it does, check the box, incorporate the form. If not, just skip through. Now, the thing about this form is that most of this text corresponds with all this up here. That's why you see this paragraph right here. It's telling you, hey, do you want more information? Do you want the backstory on it? This is where it's telling you to look below. So see like 6B, if we scroll down here, 6B, that gives you the whole explanation and unabridged verbiage regarding that term up there. So this is just repeats everything we've already done. It just basically gives you all the related stipulations. It's the fine print, we'll say. It's the fine print for everything we did up here. And we don't need to go through it, because this is something that, as a broker, I'm referencing all the time because issues come up and I have to go look, well, what does the fine print say? Because that usually settles it. But you can read through all this. This is all boilerplate verbiage. It's done. There's no modifying it. There's nothing you do here. It's already built into the agreement. You're just having your client initial and you're going through it. You've already done it all. All right. We're just going through fine print boilerplate text. That's it. Nothing to get worked up about. This is all good stuff. Like I said, C.A.R has abandoned any sense of simplicity. Now, the positive side of the mess that all that makes is that there's a lot in here to disclose, or to be an advisory, or to give explanation, or so there's a lot of good verbiage that is built in to protect everyone. Look how I'm scrolling through all these pages of boilerplate text. All right. And we get down to, finally, we're on page 15 of 17 of the purchase agreement. Now, so both parties initial here. Okay. If you have a question about this, leave a comment, but I won't go on. But this is about the earnest money deposit, liquidated damages. Both parties initial are. Mediation, built into the agreement. Arbitration, not built in. Both parties have to initial to go to arbitration if mediation doesn't work. Basically, something goes wrong, the parties have to go to mediation, or they're supposed to. Arbitration is if mediation doesn't work. They agree to go arbitration. Interestingly enough, I talked to an insurance adjuster for an E&O company. He said arbitration clauses, these agreements here, are a disaster. He went off about how horrible they are. And it was the first time I ever heard anything about this, because I was under the impression that arbitration was to avoid litigation. It was, if mediation doesn't work, playing nice in a conference room, talking it out, well, you can go to and before an arbitrator. And he said it's bad. But that was just one opinion. If anyone knows anything about why arbitration is worse than going to litigation, please feel welcome to leave a comment on it. But in the meantime, I'm still having my buyers sign this. I'm having the buyer initial 3 times on page 15 of 17. One up here for liquidated damages, one up here for arbitration, and then at the very bottom, just on every page, you have to initial on the bottom. So 3 initials on page 15 of 17. One final and important point. Is your buyer an entity? Is it an LLC? Is it a living trust? If your buyer is an entity, check this box right here, 32B. Then write out the entity name. Home Investor LLC, whatever it is. The trust, write it out. Then go down here and you write out, Home Investor LLC or Johnson Living Trust, whatever the buyer's name is, or the legal buyer, which is the entity. Then have the individual on behalf of the entity sign. Bob Buyer could be the corporate officer for the entity buying. And then that you write out Bob Buyer here and you have Bob Buyer sign there. That is for entity buyers. So fill this section out check this box, fill this out for entity buyers, okay? It tells you right here, legally authorized signer, again, Bob Buyer. So you're putting the entity name here, the authorized individual signer right there. And then you're doing it again down here, okay? And for everyone else, it's simple. Bob Buyer's name is already down here, and you have Bob Buyer sign and date, and that's it. You're done. You're done. And of course, the seller can counter or agree right there. You're going to come down here, fill out all of your information right there, all of your info. And as much as this listing brokerage as you can find off the MLS, and you're done. Okay, now we're finished that's page 17 of 17 of the RPA. This is a newer form. Came out October of this year. We're trying to hit that 30 mark for number of pages, and we're only at 29. Can you believe that? Come on, C.A.R. Add some more. Federal reporting requirement purchase addendum. Do you really care? I mean, it's important, obviously, but you're not going to read all this. Just have your buyer sign. They can read it. Buyer investigation advisory. Oldie but goodie, okay? All right, obviously telling the buyer they need to investigate what they're buying. Buyer signs. We're continuing on. You know what I realized? Not even me. Again, I've been licensed since 2002. This form, though, this only came out, it was years ago. I don't know, 7 years ago. I don't remember when this form first came out, but I realized I've never read it because I get the idea from the bold lines. And I get that there's a need for this, but for crying out loud, C.A.R form makers, take this, copy, paste it in ChatGPT and say, condense to 1/8 the size while retaining the same legal effect. I challenge you. I challenge any step towards simplicity. All right, both you and your buyer are going to sign this possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. All right, we're going on fair housing discrimination. Okay, great. We're going to have the buyer sign that. Buyer homeowners insurance advisory. I just got my annual non-renewal notice a few days ago. So it's a classic California thing. I've probably had 4 or 5 different insurance companies in the last 7 years. It's pretty nuts how almost every year I get a non-renewal. So it's basically saying that, we have a big issue with homeowners insurance here. It's good for the buyer to know. Does it warrant this whole form? No, in my opinion, but it should be on somewhere that we advise, Buyer signs it. We move on. Wire fraud. Good to know. Buyer signs. Consumer Privacy Act advisory. Buyer signs. Believe it or not, we just finished. We're on page 29 of 29 in 2025. Hopefully we'll hit the big 3-0 next year. I believe in C.A.R. I'm sure we can hit the big 3-0 or even more in number of pages in the RPA bundle. I hope you found this helpful. Please leave a comment. Thank you for watching.